Hey dreamers, welcome. I'm Maya, and I'm so glad you found your way here. Think of this channel as a little place where stories come alive, dreams feel a little closer, and imagination has no limits. Because every dream begins with a thought, every journey begins with a step, and every beautiful story begins with someone who dares to believe. So, if you're someone who loves to dream, imagine, feel, and believe in the magic of possibilities, you belong here. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and become a part of this little dream-filled family. And remember, you bring the dream, I'll bring the story. And together, let's dream beyond the impossible. Welcome to the journey. Chapter 1. The rain had turned the city streets into mirrors, reflecting golden street lamps and blurred neon signs. Outside the old cathedral, a black limousine waited beneath the storm. Father Mateo had already gone inside. Sister Clara remained beneath the stone archway, clutching her rosary, watching the rain fall. A tall man in a black suit approached her. Clara, you shouldn't be here. Adrian, and yet, every time I tell myself I shouldn't come, I end up here. Clara, Adrian, this is a church. Adrian, I know. Clara, you have men watching the entrance. Adrian, they're here to protect you. Clara, I don't need protection from the rain. Adrian, not from the rain. She looked at him carefully. Adrian Moretti was the billionaire everyone in the city feared. His name appeared in financial magazines beside photographs of skyscrapers and luxury cars. But beneath the polished reputation was another name whispered in darker rooms, the name of a mafia boss. And somehow, he had fallen hopelessly in love with a woman who had devoted her life to God. Clara, you need to leave. Adrian, no. Clara, you can't simply say no. Adrian, I can when it concerns you. Clara, you don't own me. His expression softened. Adrian, I know. Clara, then why do you keep following me? Adrian, because every time I try to stay away, I remember you. Clara, you barely know me. Adrian, I know enough. He stepped closer, but Clara immediately took a step back. Adrian stopped. Adrian, you're afraid of me. Clara, I'm afraid of what you might do. For the first time, the ruthless man looked wounded. Adrian, I would never hurt you. Clara, you threaten people every day. Adrian, people who threaten me. Clara, you destroy life. Adrian, and I would destroy anyone who tried to destroy yours. Clara, that's not love, Adrian. He stared at her for several seconds. Adrian, then teach me what love is. Clara's fingers tightened around her rosary. Clara, love means letting someone choose. Silence. The rain grew heavier. Adrian, then choose me. Clara, I already chose. She touched the small silver cross around her neck. Clara, years ago. His jaw tightened. Adrian, I know what you promised. Clara, then respect it. Adrian, I can't. Her eyes widened. Clara, you can't. Adrian, I tried. He looked toward the cathedral. Adrian, I gave money to the orphanage because you work there. I bought the building next door because I wanted to make sure no one could hurt you. I stopped 3 wars between rival families because you told me violence only creates more suffering. Clara, you did those things because you wanted to. Adrian, I did them because you asked. Clara, then perhaps there is hope for you. A faint smile appeared on his face. Adrian, there is one thing you cannot ask me to do. Clara, what? Adrian, forget you. She shook her head sadly. Clara, Adrian, marry me. The words seemed to disappear into the rain. Clara stared at him. Clara, no, Adrian, I expected that. Clara, then why ask? Adrian, because I'm not giving up. Clara, you cannot force me into marriage. His expression became serious. Adrian, I can make the world outside this cathedral very difficult for you. She went still. Clara, was that a threat? Adrian looked away. Adrian, it was a warning. Clara, it's the same thing. He closed his eyes briefly. Adrian, you're right. Clara, then listen to me. If you truly love me, you will never use your power against me. Adrian looked back at her. Adrian, and if I promise? Clara, promises mean nothing if you don't keep them. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara immediately shook her head. Clara, no, Adrian, you don't even know what's inside. Clara, I know enough. He opened it. Inside was a simple ring, elegant rather than extravagant. Adrian, I bought this 6 months ago. Clara, why? Adrian, because I thought one day you might look at me and see something other than the monster everyone else sees. Clara, I don't think you're a monster. His eyes lifted. Clara, but I don't think you're ready to be a husband either. That struck him harder than any insult. Adrian, tell me how. Clara, how what? Adrian, how do I become the man you could choose? She hesitated. Clara, start by letting me walk away tonight. Adrian looked at the ring. Then he slowly closed the box. Adrian, all right. Clara blinked. Clara, all right. Adrian, you may walk away. He stepped aside. She walked past him. After several steps, she stopped. Clara, Adrian, yes, Clara, if you really want me to choose you someday. He waited. Clara, become someone I can choose without fear. For once, the most powerful man in the city had no clever answer. Adrian, I will. She disappeared through the cathedral doors. Adrian remained alone beneath the rain. His bodyguard approached. Bodyguard, boss. Adrian didn't move. Bodyguard, should we follow Sister Clara? He slowly shook his head. Adrian, no. Bodyguard, but, Adrian, no one follows her. The bodyguard nodded. Adrian looked toward the cathedral one last time. Adrian, and cancel the wedding preparations. The bodyguard stared at him. Bodyguard, the wedding. Adrian slipped the ring box back into his pocket. Adrian, there won't be a wedding unless she chooses it. He turned toward the waiting limousine. For the first time in his life, Adrian Moretti understood that there was one thing even billions of dollars, power, and fear could not buy. A person's heart, and if he wanted Clarice, he would have to earn it. Chapter 2. The following week, Adrian Moretti became remarkably difficult to avoid. Clara noticed it on Monday morning when a black car appeared outside the convent. On Tuesday, 3 crates of groceries arrived at the orphanage. On Wednesday, the broken heater in the children's dormitory was mysteriously replaced. By Thursday, Clara had had enough. She marched across the courtyard, carrying a small envelope, and found Adrian standing beside his car in an immaculate black suit. Clara, you. Adrian glanced at her. Adrian, good morning, sister. Clara, stop sending things. Adrian, good morning to you too. She held up the envelope. Clara, the groceries, the heater, the new windows, the books, the medicine. Adrian, you're welcome. Clara, I didn't thank you. Adrian, you were going to. Clara, I absolutely was not. A faint smile touched his mouth. Adrian, you're getting better at lying. Clara narrowed her eyes. Clara, and you're getting worse at leaving me alone. His smile disappeared. Adrian, I promised I wouldn't interfere with your choices. I never promised I would stop caring. Clara, there is a difference between caring and buying half the neighborhood. Adrian, the neighborhood was poorly managed. Clara, of course it was. Adrian, the roof leaked. Clara, so you bought the building. Adrian, technically, I bought the company that owned the building. She stared at him. Clara, you are impossible. Adrian, I've been called worse. Clara, I'm sure you have. He studied her face. Adrian, you look tired. Clara, I'm fine. Adrian, that's not an answer. Clara, it's the only one you're getting. Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a small paper bag. Clara immediately frowned. Clara, what's that? Adrian, breakfast. Clara, I don't want it. Adrian, you haven't eaten. Her expression changed. Clara, how would you know? Adrian, because you become more sarcastic when you're hungry. She folded her arms. Clara, I'm always sarcastic around you. Adrian, exactly. He held out the bag. She refused to take it. Adrian sighed and placed it on the stone wall beside her. Adrian, then don't eat it. He turned toward his car. Clara watched him walk away. 3 seconds later, she picked up the bag. From the corner of his eye, Adrian saw her. He smiled. Clara, don't. He stopped. Adrian, I didn't say anything. Clara, you were smiling. Adrian, I smile. Clara, not like that. Adrian, like what? She opened the bag. Inside was warm bread, fruit, and tea. Her favorite tea. She stared at it. Clara, you remembered. Adrian's voice softened. Adrian, I remember everything about you. She immediately looked away. That sentence had landed somewhere it shouldn't have. Clara, that's dangerous. Adrian, for whom? Clara, for me. He went quiet. Clara regretted saying it immediately. She turned away. Clara, I meant that your attention is inconvenient. Adrian, of course. Clara, don't sound pleased. Adrian, I'm not. Clara, you are. Adrian, a little. She rolled her eyes. Clara, you are insufferable. Adrian, And yet you're still holding my breakfast. She looked down. She was. She quickly placed the bag on the wall. Clara. There. Adrian nodded solemnly. Adrian. A tragic rejection. Clara. Good. He turned to leave again. Then Clara called after him. Clara. Adrian. He looked back. She hesitated. Clara. Thank you. His expression softened. Adrian. You're welcome. She expected him to say something smug. He didn't. Somehow, that bothered her more. That afternoon, Clara found him inside the orphanage. He was sitting on the floor. A little boy was showing him a wooden toy car. The feared mafia boss of the city was listening with absolute seriousness. Boy, this one is faster. Adrian. Why, boy? Because I painted it red. Adrian nodded. Adrian. Excellent engineering. Clara stopped in the doorway. Adrian noticed her. Adrian. Sister. Clara. What are you doing? Adrian. Apparently discussing automotive technology. The boy giggled. Clara tried not to smile. She failed. Adrian saw it. Adrian. Was that a smile? Her expression instantly disappeared. Clara. No, Adrian. Interesting. I could have sworn. Clara. You imagined it. Adrian. Probably. The boy looked between them. Boy. Are you two married? Clara nearly dropped the stack of books in her hands. Clara. No, Adrian answered at exactly the same time. Adrian. Not yet. She turned sharply toward him. Clara. Adrian. He raised both hands innocently. Adrian. You said no. I said not yet. Both statements are accurate. Clara. You enjoy provoking me. Adrian. Very much. She walked toward him. Clara. You know what your problem is. Adrian. Several things, according to you. Clara. You're arrogant. Adrian. True. Clara. Controlling. Adrian. Occasionally. Clara. Dangerous. His expression changed. Adrian. Yes. The humor vanished for a moment. Clara looked at him differently. He didn't deny it. He didn't pretend to be innocent. That honesty unsettled her. Clara. Then why are you trying so hard to be different with me? Adrian looked directly at her. Adrian. Because you make me want to be. Her heart gave an irritating little flutter. She hated it. Absolutely hated it. Clara. That's not my responsibility. Adrian. I know. Clara. Good. Adrian. But you are my reason. She stared at him. Then, quietly. Clara. You shouldn't say things like that. Adrian. Why? She looked away. Clara. Because. She couldn't finish. Adrian didn't push. For once, he simply waited. Clara finally whispered. Clara. Because sometimes I almost believe you. His expression softened. Adrian. That's all I've ever wanted. She looked back at him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara shook herself out of the moment. Clara. Don't get comfortable. Adrian smiled. Adrian. Wouldn't dream of it. She walked away. After several steps, she stopped. Without turning around, she spoke. Clara. The tea was good. Adrian's smile widened. Adrian. I'll remember that. She continued walking, and although she would never admit it, not to him, not to herself, not even in prayer, Clara had begun to wonder whether the most frightening thing about Adrian Moretti wasn't his power. Perhaps it was how safe she sometimes felt when he was near. And that frightened her far more. The rain had returned. Clara stood beneath the convent's narrow stone archway, watching the city dissolve behind sheets of silver water. She had been trying not to think about Adrian. It had become increasingly difficult. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered his voice. I remember everything about you. She hated how easily those words found their way into her thoughts. Then thunder rolled across the sky. And suddenly, the present disappeared. She was no longer standing beneath the convent archway. She was back there, 3 years earlier, on the darkest night of her life. The city had been burning with rain. Not literally, but that night, everything felt as though it were on fire. Thunder cracked overhead while rain hammered the narrow streets. Water rushed along the gutters, carrying cigarette ash, oil, and streaks of red beneath the flickering street lamps. Clara had been walking home from the hospital. She remembered clutching her small umbrella. She remembered the cold. She remembered thinking about nothing more important than getting back before the storm became worse. She had been halfway through the alley when she heard the first gunshot. Bang! She stopped. Her heart stumbled. Then came another. Bang! Closer. Clara's fingers tightened around the umbrella. People began running at the far end of the street. A car screamed around the corner. Another followed. Then she heard shouting. Men. Angry voices. A third gunshot shattered the night. Clara dropped her umbrella. She froze. Her mind told her to run. Her body refused. Two black vehicles had stopped at opposite ends of the street. Men emerged from both. Weapons appeared beneath their coats. The rival gangs had chosen the worst possible place for their confrontation. And Clara was standing directly between them. She didn't know who they were. She didn't know why they were shooting. She only knew that everyone around her suddenly seemed to be moving too fast. Someone shouted. Someone fired. Glass exploded from a nearby window. Clara screamed and stumbled backward. Then, silence. Not real silence. The rain was still pounding. Cars were still honking somewhere in the distance. Men were still shouting, but inside Clara's head, everything had gone quiet. She saw a man across the street. Tall, dark suit, wet hair, cold eyes. He stood surrounded by armed men. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He simply watched. Adrian Moretti. At the time, Clara knew nothing about him. She only knew that everyone else seemed afraid of him. And then Adrian saw her. For one suspended second, the entire city disappeared. Adrian had spent years learning how to read danger. He could identify a weapon before it was completely drawn. He could recognize an ambush by the way a man's shoulders moved. He could hear fear in someone's breathing. He had survived because hesitation meant death. That night, he had been expecting betrayal. He had been expecting bullets. He had been expecting blood. He had not been expecting her. A woman standing in the middle of a gunfight. Rain dripping from her hair. Her pale hands trembling. Her eyes enormous with fear. She looked impossibly out of place. Too soft. Too innocent. Too human for the world Adrian inhabited. His first thought was simple. Move. His second was more dangerous. Beautiful. Adrian hated the second thought immediately. He didn't know her. He shouldn't have noticed the curve of her frightened expression. He shouldn't have noticed the way wet strands of hair clung to her cheek. He shouldn't have noticed the tiny silver cross resting against her chest. Yet he noticed everything. A gunshot erupted. Adrian's head snapped toward the muzzle flash. One of the rival soldiers had aimed across the street. Not at him. At her. Adrian moved before he consciously understood what he was doing. Adrian. Down. Clara didn't move. Her eyes met his. For a fraction of a second, they simply stared at one another. And Adrian understood something terrifying. She couldn't hear him. Or perhaps she was too frightened to obey. The gun fired. Adrian crossed the distance between them. His shoulder slammed into her. They fell against the wet pavement. Another shot tore through the night. Pain exploded through Adrian's upper arm. He gritted his teeth. The bullet had struck him. He barely noticed. Because Clara was beneath him. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were gripping the front of his soaked shirt. And she was trembling. Adrian lifted his head. Adrian, are you hurt? Clara opened her eyes. She stared at him. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Adrian looked at her face. Rain ran down her forehead. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. And something inside him shifted. He had seen beautiful women before. He had been surrounded by them. He had never cared. But this wasn't beauty in the way magazines described it. It was something quieter. Something painfully real. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She was simply terrified. And Adrian couldn't look away. Why are you looking at me like that? The question existed only in Clara's mind. Her lips trembled. Who are you? Adrian's gaze remained fixed on hers. Someone you should run from. She swallowed. Then why are you protecting me? He didn't know. That was the problem. Another burst of gunfire erupted nearby. Adrian immediately moved. He pulled Clara against his chest and turned his back toward the street. His body became a shield. His injured arm hung uselessly for a moment. His other hand covered the back of her head. Adrian, stay down. It was the first clear thing she heard him say. His voice was low, controlled, almost unnaturally calm. Clara stared at him. Clara. Adrian, don't speak. She obeyed. Adrian glanced toward his men. His expression changed. The tenderness vanished. The Mafia boss returned. Adrian, get her out. One of his men moved forward. Clara immediately grabbed Adrian's sleeve. Clara. No. He looked at her. It was barely a whisper. Clara, don't leave me. Adrian froze. Those 4 words did something no bullet ever had. They disarmed him. For a man who had built his entire life around control, it was terrifying. He looked at her hand wrapped around his sleeve. Then at her eyes. Don't leave me. His mind repeated her words. He should have handed her to his men. He should have walked away. Instead, he crouched closer. Adrian, I'm not leaving. Clara stared at him. You don't even know me. He seemed to answer the thought. Adrian, I don't need to. She frowned. Clara, what? For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered across his face. Adrian, nothing. A bullet struck the brick wall beside them. Clara flinched violently. Adrian pulled her closer. His jaw tightened. The softness in his eyes disappeared. He looked toward the rival gang. Adrian, you chose the wrong night. One of his men shouted from across the street. Man, boss, they're retreating. Adrian didn't answer. His attention remained on Clara. Her breathing was fast. He could feel her heartbeat against him. Or perhaps it was his own. He couldn't tell anymore. Clara. Years later, Clara still remembered that heartbeat. She had thought it was hers. Perhaps it had been. Perhaps both of them had been frightened in completely different ways. She remembered looking at him and thinking, he's dangerous. Then, but I'm safe right now. And that contradiction had frightened her more than the gunfire. She remembered his wounded arm. The blood, his soaked shirt, the way he seemed almost indifferent to his own pain. Clara, you're bleeding. Adrian glanced down. Adrian, it's nothing. Clara, nothing. Adrian, I've had worse. Clara, you were shot because of me. His eyes returned to hers. Adrian, no. Clara, yes. Adrian, I chose to step in front of you. She stared. Clara, why? Adrian had no answer, not one he was willing to give. So he said the only thing that came naturally. Adrian, because you were standing there. She frowned. Clara, that's not an answer. Adrian, it's the only one I have. Rain poured between them. Clara looked at his face. He seemed almost angry with himself. She couldn't understand why. Then he reached toward her. She flinched. He stopped immediately. His hand remained suspended between them. Adrian, may I? She didn't understand. He pointed toward her cheek. There was a tiny cut there from broken glass. Clara nodded. His fingers gently brushed the blood away. The gesture was unexpectedly careful. She looked at his hand. Then at his face. How can hands that probably hurt people touch me so gently? Adrian studied her. How can someone look at me as though I'm still capable of being human? Neither spoke the thought aloud. They didn't need to. Something had already passed between them. Something neither understood. Something neither had asked for. A siren wailed in the distance. Clara finally remembered herself. She stepped backward. Adrian let her. Clara, I should go. Adrian, yes. She took another step, then stopped. Clara, what is your name? He hesitated. For some reason, he didn't want to tell her. Names created connections. Connections created weaknesses. And Adrian had spent his entire life eliminating weaknesses. Still, he answered. Adrian. Adrian. She nodded. Clara. I'm Clara. He looked at her. He would remember that name for the rest of his life. Adrian. Clara. The way he said it made her heart beat faster. She hated that. She shouldn't have noticed. She shouldn't have cared. She should have been terrified. Instead, she found herself looking at the blood soaking through his sleeve. Clara, you need a doctor. Adrian, I'll survive. Clara, you don't know that. A faint smile appeared. Adrian, you're worried about me. Clara immediately frowned. Clara, I'm worried about anyone who gets shot. Adrian, of course. Clara, don't misunderstand. Adrian, I wouldn't dare. She looked away, then back at him. Clara, thank you. Adrian's expression softened. Adrian, you're welcome. She began walking. After a few steps, she turned. He was still watching her. Their eyes met again, and Clara suddenly had the strange sensation that something had begun. Something she didn't want. Something she couldn't name. Something dangerous. She whispered. Clara, goodbye, Adrian. He watched her disappear into the rain. Then he looked down at his wounded arm. One of his men approached. Man, boss, the doctor is waiting. Adrian didn't answer. Man, boss. Finally, Adrian spoke. Adrian, find out who she is. The man hesitated. Man, the woman. Adrian looked at him. One glance was enough. Man, yes, boss. Adrian turned toward the street where Clara had vanished. He knew better than anyone that obsession was dangerous. He knew attachment could be exploited. He knew tenderness was a weakness. And yet, for the first time in his life, he found himself willing to risk all three. Now, Clara opened her eyes. The convent courtyard returned. The rain was still falling. Her fingers had unconsciously closed around the cross at her neck. She remembered his blood, his voice, his wounded arm, those impossible eyes, and the way he had looked at her that night, as if the entire violent world had disappeared the moment he saw her. Clara, why did you have to remember that? A voice answered behind her. Adrian, Because I remember it too. She spun around. Adrian stood beneath the archway. She stared at him. Clara, you heard me. Adrian, only the last part. Clara, how long have you been standing there? Adrian, long enough. Her cheeks warmed. Clara, you shouldn't sneak up on people. Adrian, you were somewhere else. Clara, I was remembering. Adrian, so was I. Silence. She looked at his arm. The old scar was hidden beneath his sleeve. Clara, it was stupid. Adrian, what was? Clara, you taking that bullet. He looked at her. Adrian, I'd do it again. Her heart betrayed her. One hard beat, then another. She lowered her eyes. Clara, that's exactly what frightens me. Adrian stepped closer. Not enough to touch, just enough for her to feel his presence. Adrian, and what frightens me, Clara? She looked up. His voice dropped. Adrian, is that I'd still choose you. She couldn't answer. Neither could he. So they stood there beneath the storm, staring at one another. Two people who had first met in the middle of gunfire. Two people who should have remained strangers. Two people who had somehow become the one weakness neither was willing to name. And somewhere between fear and memory, Clara realized the truth she had spent years denying. She had not remembered that night because she hated Adrian. She remembered it because a part of her had never truly forgotten the moment he stepped between her and death. And Adrian, he had never forgotten the frightened girl whose eyes had made a ruthless man forget, for the first time in his life, how to pull the trigger. Adrian Moretti had always been good at finding things. Money could buy information. Power could force people to talk. Fear could open doors that remained locked to everyone else. But Clara's past was different. The more he learned, the less satisfied he became. Because every answer led to another question. And every question led him deeper into a life she had never willingly shown him. It began with a single file. Adrian sat alone in his study at 2 in the morning, the city glittering beneath the windows of his penthouse. The folder lay unopened on his desk. His right hand rested on top of it. He had ordered information about Clara. He had told himself it was for protection. That was only partially true. He wanted to understand her. Why she flinched at raised voices. Why she hated the smell of whiskey. Why sudden arguments made her grow quiet. Why she always seemed surprised when someone did something kind for her. And why, whenever Adrian offered her anything expensive, she looked almost uncomfortable, as though generosity was something she had never learned how to receive. He opened the file. The first page contained her name. Clara Elise. Age. Birthplace. Education. Family. Adrian's expression remained emotionless. Then he reached the section marked father. He read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened. Her father had been an alcoholic. A violent, unreliable man who had spent years disappearing into bars and returning home angry. There were records of domestic disturbances. Hospital visits. Neighbors' complaints. Then came her mother. Dead when Clara was still young. The official record called it complications following repeated physical abuse. Adrian stopped breathing for a moment. He read the sentence again. His fingers slowly curled around the edge of the paper. Adrian, you bastard. The words were barely audible. He turned the page. Her younger brother. Dead in an accident. Adrian leaned back. For several seconds, he simply stared at the ceiling. Clara had never told him. Not once. She smiled when children showed her broken toys. She remembered everyone's birthdays. She always carried extra food for someone who might be hungry. She apologized when someone else stepped on her foot. And she had grown up surrounded by things that should have taught her cruelty. Instead, somehow, they had taught her tenderness. He continued reading. Then he reached a section that made something cold settle inside him. There had been an incident when Clara was a teenager. Her father had been present when a man attempted to take advantage of her. He hadn't intervened. Clara had escaped herself. The report was brief, clinical, impersonal. Adrian hated it. He pushed the folder away. Then pulled it back. He needed to know, not because he wanted to possess her past. Because suddenly he understood the things she had never said. The silence, the fear, the way she sometimes looked at doors. The instinctive recoil when someone moved too quickly. Adrian closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wished he had never ordered a file. Because now he knew, and knowing meant carrying it. The next pages told a different story. Clara had eventually been taken in by a convent. There was almost no money. No comfortable childhood. No privileged education. She had struggled with basic reading and mathematics. Yet one of the senior sisters had noticed her. Sister Agnes. The file described her as a mentor. But Adrian suspected the word was inadequate. Agnes had become the elder sister Clara never had. She had taught her to read. She had taught her to care for the sick. She had taught her that kindness wasn't weakness. That feeding someone hungry mattered. That sitting beside someone who was grieving mattered. That a person didn't need wealth to give something meaningful. Clara had absorbed every lesson. Slowly, she began helping the younger children. Then the elderly. Then anyone who needed her. At 19, she had taken her vows. She had chosen a life devoted to service. Adrian stared at that sentence for a long time. 19. She had chosen God at an age when most people were still trying to discover themselves. And perhaps that was what made him feel so conflicted. She had spent her life giving herself away to others. And now he had entered her life demanding something she had never intended to give. Himself. Adrian shut the file. He couldn't sleep. The following morning, Clara found him outside the orphanage. She immediately noticed something different. He wasn't teasing her. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to provoke her. He simply watched her. Clara. What? Adrian. Nothing. Clara. You're staring. Adrian. I know. Clara. That's not normal. Adrian. Neither am I. She sighed. Clara. What happened? He looked at the children running through the courtyard. Adrian. Tell me about Sister Agnes. Clara froze. Clara. Why? Adrian. Because I want to know the woman who taught you how to become yourself. Her expression softened. Clara. You know about her? Adrian. A little. Clara. How? He hesitated. She understood. Her eyes narrowed. Clara. Adrian. Adrian. I looked into your past. She stepped back. Clara. You had no right. He didn't defend himself. Adrian. You're right. That stopped her. She had expected an argument. Instead, he accepted it. Clara. Why? Adrian. Because I wanted to understand you. Clara. You don't need to understand everything about me. Adrian. I know. He looked down. Adrian. I just wanted to know what made you so kind. She looked away. Clara. Sister Agnes. Adrian. Tell me. Clara hesitated. Then she smiled faintly. Clara. She used to say that pain can make you cruel, but it can also make you gentle. You get to choose. Adrian swallowed. Adrian. And you chose gentle. Clara. I tried. Adrian. You succeeded. She shook her head. Clara. You don't know that. Adrian. I do. Clara. You barely know me. He looked directly into her eyes. Adrian. I know enough. She hated that answer, mostly because she liked hearing it. That evening, Adrian found himself remembering every line of the file. Her father, her mother, her brother, the fear, the convent, Sister Agnes, the vows, and suddenly the attraction he felt toward Clara seemed almost unbearably complicated. It wasn't merely her face. Though he noticed that too. The softness of her features. The warm color that appeared in her cheeks when she was embarrassed. The way she lowered her eyes when complimented. The courage hidden beneath her gentleness. The stubbornness she disguised as patience. The way she looked frightened sometimes and still stepped forward to help someone else. Adrian had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Clara wanted nothing. That was precisely what made her dangerous. She could not be bought. She could not be intimidated into affection. She didn't care about his wealth. She didn't care about his reputation. And every time she looked at him, he felt as though she were seeing the man beneath everything he had built. It drove him insane. Days passed. Adrian tried to stay away. He failed. He would see her from across a street. A balcony. A garden. A church entrance. He would tell himself to keep walking. Then she would look up. Their eyes would meet, and somehow his feet would turn in her direction. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. One evening, she confronted him in the library. Clara, you're doing it again. Adrian looked up from the book he wasn't reading. Adrian, doing what? Clara, following me. Adrian, I was here first. Clara, you were waiting. Adrian, perhaps. She approached the table. Clara, why? He closed the book. Adrian, because I wanted to see you. Her cheeks warmed. Clara, you can't say things like that. Adrian, why? Clara, because. She struggled for the words. Clara, because I don't know what to do with them. For once, Adrian had no teasing answer. He stood. The distance between them shortened. Clara immediately noticed. Clara, you're too close. He stopped. Adrian, tell me to move. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. His eyes searched hers. Adrian, Clara, Clara, what? Adrian, tell me. She looked away. Clara, I should. Adrian, that's not what I asked. Her heartbeat accelerated. Clara, You make everything difficult. Adrian. I know. Clara. You shouldn't be here. Adrian. Probably. Clara. You shouldn't look at me like that. Adrian. How am I looking at you? She swallowed. Clara. Like, she couldn't say it. He waited. Clara. Like you already know something about me that I don't. His expression softened. Adrian. Perhaps I know something you're afraid to admit. She immediately stepped backward. Clara. Don't. He didn't follow. Adrian. I'm not going to force anything. She looked at him. Adrian. But I won't lie about what I feel. Silence. Her heart was beating too quickly. She hated the sensation. She hated how aware she had become of him. His voice. His hands. His presence. The faint scent of rain and cedar that seemed to follow him. She hated that sometimes she waited for him. She hated that she noticed when he didn't come. Most of all, she hated that she was beginning to wonder what it would feel like if he ever touched her hand without anger or urgency between them. Later that night, the power went out. The convent corridors fell into darkness. Clara was carrying a candle when she heard footsteps. She stopped. Clara. Who's there? No answer. The footsteps continued. Her heart jumped. Then a familiar voice came from the darkness. Adrian. It's me. She exhaled. Clara. You frightened me. Adrian. I'm sorry. Clara. What are you doing here? Adrian. Checking the security. Clara. At midnight. Adrian. Apparently. She shook her head. Clara. You're impossible. She turned. The candle flickered. Adrian stepped closer. The small flame illuminated half his face. For a moment, neither moved. Then Clara's candle went out. Darkness swallowed them. She inhaled sharply. Clara. Adrian. Adrian. I'm here. His voice was closer now. She could feel his presence. Clara. I can't see. Adrian. I know. She took a small step backward. Her shoulder touched the wall. Adrian stopped a few feet away. Adrian. Are you afraid? She whispered. Clara. A little. Adrian. Of me. A long silence. Clara. Not exactly. His breathing changed. Adrian. Then what? She closed her eyes. Clara. Of myself. He didn't move. The words seemed to hang between them. Adrian. Why? Clara. Because I don't understand what happens to me when you're near. Her cheeks burned despite the darkness. Adrian's voice became quieter. Adrian. Neither do I. She heard him move closer. One step. Then another. He stopped before touching her. Adrian. May I? Her lips trembled. She knew what he meant. She should have said no. She should have walked away. Instead, after a long pause, she whispered. Clara. Just my hand. Adrian reached toward her slowly. His fingers brushed hers. Clara shivered. It was barely a touch. Nothing improper. Nothing dramatic. And yet her entire world seemed to tilt. His hand closed gently around hers. Warm. Steady. Careful. She looked into the darkness as though she could somehow see him. Clara. Why does this feel so frightening? Adrian. Because it matters. Her breath caught. Clara. Don't say things like that. Adrian. You keep telling me that. Clara. And you never listen. Adrian. Not when it comes to you. She tried to pull her hand away. He released her immediately. The absence of his touch was somehow worse. She looked down, then back into the darkness. Clara. You let go. Adrian. You asked me to. Clara. I didn't say anything. Adrian. Your hand did. She stared, then whispered. Clara. You notice too much. Adrian. Only you. She covered her face with one hand. Clara. You're impossible. His quiet laughter echoed through the darkness. Adrian. And you're blushing. Clara. You can't even see me. Adrian. I don't need to. She nearly smiled. Nearly. Then Adrian stepped back. Adrian. You should sleep. Clara. Are you leaving? The question escaped before she could stop it. Silence. She immediately regretted it. Adrian. Do you want me to stay? Her heart hammered. Clara. No. A pause. Clara. I mean. She stopped. Adrian waited. Clara. I don't know. His voice was gentle. Adrian. Then I will leave. She looked toward where she thought he stood. Clara. Adrian. Adrian. Yes. Clara. Thank you. Adrian. For what? She couldn't explain. For not taking advantage of the darkness. For letting go. For understanding her fear. For making her feel wanted without making her feel owned. So she simply said, Clara. For listening. He smiled, though she couldn't see it. Adrian. Always. His footsteps faded. Clara remained against the wall. She touched the hand he had held. Her cheeks were still warm. Her heartbeat still too fast. And somewhere inside her, Something she had spent years keeping carefully locked away had begun to awaken. She didn't know its name. She wasn't ready to give it one. Across the courtyard, Adrian stood beneath the rain. He had wanted to stay. God, he had wanted to. He wanted to touch her again. To pull her close. To erase every memory that had ever made her afraid. But wanting was not permission. So he had walked away. He looked toward the dark window of the room where Clara would soon sleep. For once, his greatest battle wasn't against another gang. It wasn't against the police. It wasn't against his enemies. It was against himself. He had spent years mastering violence. Now he had to learn restraint. And Clara was teaching him the hardest lesson of all. Love could not be taken. It had to be freely given. Clara lay awake long after he left. She remembered his hand, his voice, the teasing certainty with which he had told her he could see her blush even in darkness. She pressed her palms together. Clara, this is dangerous. But the quiet room offered no answer. She closed her eyes. And, despite herself, she smiled. Just a little, because for the first time, the dangerous man in her thoughts wasn't frightening her. He was making her wonder. And that was somehow far more terrifying. Clara had spent her entire life believing that a vow was stronger than desire. She had made her choice at 19. She had knelt before the altar, placed her hands together, and promised herself to a life of service. No husband, no children, no possession, no man would ever become the center of the life she had surrendered to God. It had seemed simple then. But perhaps human beings were not the only ones capable of making promises. Perhaps heaven had been writing a different story long before Clara ever learned how to read. And perhaps the strange path that had led her from a broken childhood, through the convent gates, and finally into the orbit of Adrian Moretti had never been an accident. She simply did not know it yet. Adrian had begun appearing everywhere. At the orphanage, outside the convent, at the hospital, near the market, always close enough to intervene. Never quite close enough for Clara to accuse him of following her. She hated it. She also noticed when he wasn't there. That frightened her more. One afternoon, Clara confronted him beside the convent garden. Clara, you have to stop. Adrian looked up from his phone. Adrian, stop what? Clara, protecting me. His expression hardened. Adrian, no, Clara, you didn't even think about it. Adrian, I thought about it for weeks. Clara, then think again. He stepped toward her. Adrian, there are people in this city who would use you to reach me. Clara, I don't belong to you. Adrian, I know. Clara, then stop acting as though I do. His jaw tightened. Adrian, I don't know how. The honesty caught her off guard. She looked at him. He looked furious, not with her, but with himself. Adrian, I understand property, territory, power, deals, enemies. He took another step. Adrian, I understand how to acquire something and how to defend it. His eyes met hers. Adrian, I don't understand what happens when the thing I want cannot be bought. Clara's heart skipped. Clara, I am not a thing. Adrian, I know. His voice lowered. Adrian, that's what makes you impossible. That night, Clara prayed longer than usual. She asked for strength. She asked for clarity. Most of all, she asked not to confuse temptation with destiny. But the silence that followed felt strangely peaceful, as though some unseen hand had already turned the pages of her life. You are asking whether this man belongs in your story, something within her seemed to whisper. But what if the story was never yours alone to write? Clara opened her eyes. She immediately rejected the thought. No, God would never demand betrayal. Never demand that she abandon her vows. Never ask her to surrender herself to a dangerous man. And yet, perhaps destiny was not always comfortable. Perhaps the answer had been placed in front of her long before she was ready to recognize it. 3 days later, Adrian arrived at the convent furious. Clara knew something was wrong before he spoke. Clara, what happened? Adrian, nothing you need to worry about. Clara, then why are you angry? Adrian, because someone threatened this place. Her face changed. Clara, the convent. Adrian, yes. Clara, who? Adrian, a rival organization. She stared at him. Clara, why? Adrian's expression became cold. Adrian, because they know you're important to me. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Clara, no. Adrian, Clara, no, you brought this here. He didn't deny it. Adrian, yes. She stepped closer, anger replacing fear. Clara, then leave. Adrian, I can't. Clara, you can. Adrian, not while you're in danger. Clara, My life was peaceful before you. His eyes darkened. Adrian, and I will make sure it becomes peaceful again. Clara. How? He hesitated. That hesitation frightened her. Clara. Adrian. Adrian. By moving you. Clara. Where? Adrian. Somewhere no one can reach you. She shook her head. Clara. I'm not going anywhere with you. Adrian. Then they will come here. Clara. You can't know that. Adrian. I know exactly what men like them do. His voice dropped. Adrian. And I will not gamble with your life. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Clara. What about my vows? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Adrian. I know what they mean to you. Clara. Do you? Adrian. More than you think. Clara. Then let me stay. He shook his head. Adrian. I can't. The next morning, the church received an anonymous threat. It demanded that Adrian surrender control of several territories. If he refused, the orphanage and convent would be targeted. Clara read the letter. Her hands trembled. She knew what Adrian would do. He would fight, and people would die. She also knew what would happen if he lost. She looked at the altar. Then at Sister Agnes. Clara. What should I do? Agnes touched her shoulder. Agnes. What does your heart say? Clara closed her eyes. Her heart said Adrian. Her conscience said duty. Her fear said run. Her faith said trust. And somewhere between all four, she made a decision. She would go with him. Not because she belonged to him. Not because she had surrendered. Because hundreds of innocent people were standing between two worlds, and Clara could not allow them to suffer because of her. Adrian found her waiting outside. She wore a simple dark coat. Her eyes were red from crying. He stopped. Adrian. Clara. Clara. I'll go. He stared at her. Adrian. No. She looked confused. Clara. What? Adrian. Not like this. Clara. You said I had to leave. Adrian. I said I would protect you. Clara. Then take me somewhere safe. He approached slowly. Adrian. You shouldn't have to sacrifice yourself for me. Clara. I'm not. She looked toward the church. Clara. I'm protecting people. His expression softened. Adrian. You're always protecting everyone. Clara. Someone has to. Adrian. Who protects you? She looked at him. Clara. Apparently you. For the first time that morning, he smiled. Only slightly. Adrian. Apparently. The journey to Adrian's estate was silent. Clara sat beside the window. Adrian sat opposite her. Every few minutes, she glanced at him. Every time she did, she found him already watching. Eventually she sighed. Clara. Do you ever stop? Adrian. No. Clara. Staring at me. Adrian. No. Clara. Why? He looked out the window. Adrian. Because every time I look away, I remember that you might disappear. She didn't answer. His estate was enormous. Dark stone, tall windows, security everywhere. Clara hated it immediately. Clara. This is a prison. Adrian. It's a fortress. Clara. Same thing. Adrian. Not to me. She turned toward him. Clara. What happens now? Adrian looked at her. There was something frighteningly determined in his eyes. Adrian. You stay here. Clara. For how long? Adrian. Until the threat is gone. Clara. And if I refuse? He stepped closer, then stopped himself. Adrian. I won't lock you in. She blinked. Adrian. But I will put guards outside. Clara. That's still controlling. Adrian. Yes. Clara. You admit it. Adrian. I am not pretending to be someone I'm not. He looked at her with unsettling intensity. Adrian. But I will never force you to touch me. Her breath caught. Adrian. Never. The words mattered. She nodded slowly. Days passed. The danger outside remained. And somehow, being near Adrian became more difficult than being afraid of him. He was everywhere. At breakfast. In the library. Walking through the gardens. Standing near the fireplace at night. He never touched her without asking. Yet his presence itself felt like a touch. One evening, Clara entered the library and found him reading. Clara. You're here. Adrian. It's my library. Clara. I know. Adrian. You sound disappointed. Clara. I was hoping for silence. Adrian. You found me instead. She rolled her eyes. Clara. Unfortunately. He smiled. Adrian. You're getting comfortable. Clara. Don't flatter yourself. She reached for a book. Adrian watched. Adrian. You're shaking. She looked at her hand. She was. Clara. It's cold. He stood. Adrian. You're lying. He took off his jacket. She immediately protested. Clara. I don't need. He placed it around her shoulders without touching her skin. She froze. The scent of him surrounded her. Warm cedar. Rain. Something uniquely Adrian. Her cheeks warmed. Adrian. Better, she whispered. Clara. Yes. His eyes lingered on her face. Adrian. Good. She looked away. Clara. Stop looking at me. Adrian. I can't. Clara. Why? His answer came quietly. Adrian. Because I want you. Her heart stopped. He continued before she could respond. Adrian. Not your vows. Not your obedience. Not something I can own. He took a breath. Adrian. You. Clara's eyes filled with uncertainty. Clara. You don't understand what you're saying. Adrian. No. He gave a bitter smile. Adrian. That's the problem. Later that night, Clara found him outside. She stood beside him. Clara. Do you know what love is? Adrian looked at her. Adrian. No. She hadn't expected the answer. Clara. Then why do you say you love me? Adrian. Because whatever this is, it has destroyed every rule I've lived by. He looked at his hands. Adrian. I want to protect you. I want you near me. I want to know where you are. I hate when someone else makes you laugh. Clara's lips parted. Adrian. I don't like admitting any of it. Clara. That's possessiveness. Adrian. Probably. Clara. That's not love. Adrian. Then teach me. She stared at him. Clara. I don't know if I can. He stepped closer. Adrian. Then we'll learn. Her heart beat faster. He stopped before touching her. Adrian. But only if you stay. She looked at him, then slowly placed her hand in his. Adrian's fingers closed around hers. Neither spoke. For once, the silence wasn't frightening. Weeks later, the threat was finally dismantled. Adrian had won. The convent was safe. The orphanage was safe. Clara should have left. Instead, she remained standing at the estate gates. Adrian approached. Adrian. You can go. She looked at him. Clara. I know. Adrian. I won't stop you. Her eyes filled with tears. Clara. I know. Adrian. Then why are you still here? She didn't answer. He understood. And for the first time, Adrian did not claim victory. He simply held out his hand. Clara looked at it, then took it. The world believed Adrian Moretti had finally acquired what he wanted. They were wrong. He had spent his entire life acquiring things. Buildings, businesses, territories, people's loyalty. But Clara was not an acquisition. She was the one person who had taught him the difference. And Clara, she had spent years believing her future had already been sealed. She had never imagined that destiny might arrive wearing a black suit, carrying the sins of a violent world, and looking at her as though she were the only light he had ever seen. The mystery remained. So did her vows. So did his possessiveness. So did the danger between them. But something had changed. Adrian no longer wanted to force her to stay. He wanted her to choose. And Clara, despite every warning inside her heart, was beginning to wonder whether one day she might. Not because she was trapped. Not because she was afraid. But because, somewhere along the road between duty and destiny, the most dangerous man she had ever known had become the one person beside whom she could finally breathe. The storm inside Clara had become louder than the prayers she whispered. Every morning, she knelt before the altar. Every evening, she returned to the same question. Why Adrian? Why this man? Why now? She had spent years building walls between herself and the world. Adrian had walked into her life and somehow turned every wall into a door. She tried prayer. She tried distance. She tried silence. Nothing worked. Because Adrian had already taken residence somewhere she could not escape. Inside her thoughts. Inside her fears. Inside the strange warmth that appeared whenever she heard his footsteps. And she hated herself for waiting for him. That night, he didn't come home. At first Clara told herself it meant nothing. Adrian was often late. His world was dangerous. He had business. He had enemies. He had men who needed him. She sat in the drawing room with a book open in her lap. She read the same paragraph 12 times. The clock moved past midnight. Then 1. Then 2. She stood, walked to the window, returned to the chair, sat again. Her fingers tightened around the rosary. Clara, please let him be safe. She immediately froze. The words had escaped before she could stop them. Not let everyone be safe. Not let the men return safely. Him, Adrian. She closed her eyes. Clara, what am I doing? The silence gave no answer. Another hour passed. Then headlights appeared beyond the gates. Clara stood so quickly the chair fell behind her. A car entered the driveway. Then another. Men rushed toward the mansion. And finally, Adrian appeared. Clara's blood turned cold. He was wearing a white fitted shirt, the fabric stained with scattered blood. 2 buttons had come undone. His face was marked by cuts and bruises. One hand held a gun. The other pressed against his chest. Blood had soaked through his shirt. He walked toward the hall with the grim determination of a man who had refused to die simply because death had asked him to. Clara couldn't breathe. Clara. Adrian. His eyes found hers. For 1 second, the terrifying Mafia boss disappeared. He was simply a wounded man looking at the woman he had spent the entire night trying to return to. Adrian. Clara. She ran toward him. Then everything went black. Adrian caught her before she hit the floor. Adrian. Clara. He dropped the gun. His injured chest screamed with pain as he lifted her. Adrian. Get the doctor. His men moved instantly. Adrian carried her upstairs himself. Every step hurt. He didn't care. He laid her gently on the bed. Adrian. Come on. Nothing. He brushed damp hair away from her forehead. Adrian. You don't get to frighten me like this. The doctor arrived. After several minutes, the doctor assured him that Clara had fainted from shock and exhaustion. Adrian remained beside her. He didn't leave, not even when the pain in his chest became unbearable. Not even when his shirt was cut away from the wound. He simply watched her, waiting. Then her eyelashes moved. Her eyes opened. The first thing she saw was Adrian. Alive, sitting beside her, his face pale from blood loss. His eyes fixed desperately upon her. She stared. Her lips trembled. Clara, you're alive. Adrian swallowed. Adrian. Yes. A tear escaped her eye. Then another. Clara. I thought. Her voice broke. Adrian reached toward her. Adrian. Don't. She looked at him. He tried to smile. Adrian. I'm here. Something inside Clara broke. She sat up. Before Adrian could understand what was happening, she seized the front of his shirt and pulled him toward her. Her lips met his. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't planned. It wasn't careful. It was fear, relief, anger, love she had refused to name. Everything she had spent months denying erupted at once. Adrian froze. For one heartbeat, he couldn't move. Then his hand came to her cheek. He kissed her back, not with the ruthless certainty everyone knew. With astonishment, as though he couldn't believe she had chosen to cross the distance between them. Clara clung to his shirt. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She kissed him again, and again. Neither spoke. There were no explanations, no vows, no arguments, only the truth their bodies had been trying to deny for months. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Clara stared at him. Her face had turned crimson. Reality returned all at once. Her eyes widened. Clara. She covered her mouth. Adrian looked at her. For once, he was speechless. Then he gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Adrian. Don't regret it. She looked down. Clara. I don't know what I've done. Adrian. You told me what I could never make you say. She looked at him. Clara. What? He touched her cheek. Adrian. That you were afraid of losing me. Her eyes filled again. Clara. I was. He closed his eyes. That admission seemed to hurt more deeply than the bullet. Adrian. Clara. She reached toward his chest. He caught her hand. Adrian. Careful. She looked at the blood. Her expression changed. Clara. You're hurt. Adrian. I'll survive. Clara. Stop saying that. She carefully touched the edge of the bandage. Adrian watched her. Her fingers were trembling. Adrian. I'm safe. She shook her head. Clara. You don't understand. Adrian. Then tell me. She looked at him. Clara. When you didn't come back. Her voice cracked. Clara. I couldn't breathe. Adrian went still. She continued through tears. Clara. I prayed. I tried to tell myself you were fine. I tried to tell myself that I shouldn't care. She pressed her palm against his chest. Clara. But all I could think was that I might never see you again. Adrian covered her hand with his. Adrian. I'm sorry. Clara. Don't apologize. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. Clara. Just don't make me feel that again. His arms slowly surrounded her. She melted into him. For several minutes, neither spoke. The dangerous man who commanded an empire held her as though she were something fragile. And the woman who had spent years teaching herself not to need anyone finally allowed herself to be held. Morning arrived quietly. Soft sunlight entered through the curtains. Clara woke first. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she remembered. The rain, the blood, his arms, the kiss. Her face became warm. She turned. Adrian was awake, watching her. Clara. Were you awake? Adrian. For a while. Clara. Why didn't you say anything? Adrian. You looked peaceful. She looked away. Clara. This changes everything. Adrian. Yes. Clara. I'm still bound by my vows. Adrian's expression became serious. Adrian, I know, Clara, and I don't want to betray what I promised. Adrian, then don't. She looked at him. Clara, what? Adrian, I won't ask you to betray God. He reached for her hand. Adrian, but I won't pretend last night didn't happen. Her eyes softened. Clara, neither will I. Silence settled between them. Then Adrian lifted her hand to his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her palm. Adrian, feel that? She nodded. Adrian, I'm alive. Her eyes filled again. He smiled faintly. Adrian, you can breathe now. A tear slipped down her cheek. Clara, I don't know what God has planned for me. Adrian looked toward the sunlight. Adrian, neither do I. He looked back at her. Adrian, but for the first time, I'm willing to find out. Clara closed her eyes. She had spent years believing her future was already written. Perhaps it was. Perhaps the mysterious hand that had carried her through suffering, through the convent, through every prayer and every loss, had been leading her toward a chapter she could never have imagined. Not a chapter of betrayal. Not a chapter of surrender. A chapter of choice. She opened her eyes. Adrian was still there, wounded, exhausted, dangerous, human, and somehow, impossibly, hers to choose. She whispered, Clara, you frightened me terribly. He smiled. Adrian, I know, Clara, I was angry with you. Adrian, I know, Clara, I prayed you would come home. His smile disappeared. Adrian, I know. She looked down shyly. Clara, and when you did. He waited. She couldn't finish. Adrian gently lifted her chin. Adrian, you kissed me. Her cheeks turned scarlet. Clara, don't remind me. A rare laugh escaped him. Adrian, never. She gave him a look. Clara, you are impossible. Adrian, and you're still here. She looked toward the window. Then back at him. Clara, yes, a small word, but it carried everything. The past, the fear, the prayers, the impossible attraction, the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. And outside, the storm had finally ended. For the first time, Clara wondered whether perhaps it had never been a storm at all. Perhaps it had simply been the sound of two lives colliding. And perhaps, somewhere beyond everything they understood, fate had been waiting for them to stop running. Clara knew she had fallen in love with Adrian. There was no gentler word for it anymore. It was not curiosity, not gratitude, not the strange attachment born from danger. It was love, terrifying, unreasonable, absolute love. She discovered it in the smallest moments. When Adrian left a cup of tea beside her without being asked. When he remembered which books she liked. When he stood outside the chapel without interrupting her prayers. When he quietly replaced a broken window at the orphanage and never mentioned it. When he came home injured and smiled only after seeing her. And Adrian had discovered something even more frightening. He could no longer imagine a life without her. The man who had once considered family a weakness now found himself imagining a house filled with laughter. Children running through hallways. Clara standing beside him in sunlight. A garden, a kitchen, a Christmas tree, a life where his name wasn't whispered in fear. He wanted to give her everything she had never received. Not because he believed money could erase her past. Because he wanted her future to contain things her childhood had denied her. Peace, safety, a home, love. One morning, Clara entered the breakfast room. Adrian looked up. Their eyes met. She immediately became shy. He smiled. Adrian, good morning. Clara, good morning. He studied her for a moment. Adrian, be ready this evening. She blinked. Clara, for what? Adrian, we're going somewhere. Clara, where? Adrian, you'll see. Clara, that's suspicious. Adrian, I prefer mysterious. She narrowed her eyes. Clara, I don't trust mysterious men. Adrian, you married one. She nearly choked on her tea. Clara, I haven't married you. Adrian's smile deepened. Adrian, not yet. That afternoon, Clara returned to her room and stopped. A large box sat on the bed. She opened it. Inside was an emerald green evening gown. Beneath it rested a small velvet case. Diamond earrings. Clara touched them carefully. Clara, Adrian, she had never owned anything like this. She showered and changed, still wondering what he had planned. When she emerged from the bathroom, her hair was wet and wrapped in a towel. She walked toward the mirror, lost in thought. Then she noticed something in the reflection. Adrian, he was sitting in the chair near the window. A whiskey glass rested in his hand. He wasn't drinking anymore. He was simply staring at her. Clara froze. Their eyes met through the mirror. His expression was unreadable. But his gaze was intense enough to make her heartbeat stumble. She spun around. Clara, how long have you been sitting there? Adrian stood. Adrian, long enough. Her cheeks immediately warmed. Clara, you shouldn't be here. Adrian, probably not. He set the glass down. Then walked toward her. Clara instinctively stepped backward. Her back met the mirror. Adrian stopped close enough for her to feel his warmth. But he didn't touch her. His eyes searched hers. Adrian, are you afraid? She swallowed. Clara, a little. Adrian, of me. She hesitated. Clara, of what happens when you're near me? Something changed in his expression. He lifted his hand. His fingers gently brushed one wet strand of hair away from her cheek. Clara's breath caught. Adrian, then tell me to stop. She closed her eyes. Clara, I don't want you to. His hand paused. Adrian, Clara. She opened her eyes. Clara, I trust you. Those 3 words affected him more than any declaration could have. He touched her cheek. Adrian, you shouldn't give me that easily. Clara, you earned it. He leaned closer. His forehead rested against hers. Adrian, you have no idea what you do to me. She whispered. Clara, I think I'm beginning to. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then paused. Adrian, get ready. She blinked. Clara, that's all. He smiled. Adrian, if I stay here another minute, I may forget every promise I've made to myself. He turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he glanced back. Adrian, and Clara. Clara, yes. His voice softened. Adrian, you're beautiful. The door closed. Clara stared at herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were burning, her heart was racing, and for the first time, she understood that Adrian's restraint was not weakness. It was love trying desperately to become worthy of her. That evening, Clara descended the staircase. Adrian was waiting. He turned, and forgot how to breathe. She wore the emerald gown. It was elegant and simple. Her hair had been left loose. The diamonds at her ears caught the light. There was nothing extravagant about her. That was precisely what destroyed him. She looked like Clara, only Clara, his Clara. She stopped before him. Clara, is something wrong? He stared. Adrian, no, Clara. Then why aren't you speaking? He slowly extended his hand. Adrian, because I'm trying to remember how. She smiled. He took her hand. Adrian, come with me. The restaurant was empty. Every table had been cleared except one. Candles surrounded it. Flowers covered the center. Soft music filled the room. Clara stopped. Clara. Adrian. He looked nervous. She had never seen that before. Clara. What's happening? He took her hand. Adrian. Something I never thought I would do. He knelt. Clara covered her mouth. Clara. No. He smiled. Adrian. Yes. He opened a small box. Inside was a ring. Not enormous. Not extravagant. A beautiful emerald surrounded by diamonds. Adrian. I have spent my life taking. His voice was steady. Adrian. Taking territory. Taking opportunities. Taking control. He looked into her eyes. Adrian. But you are the first person I have ever wanted to ask. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Adrian. I don't want to possess you. He took her hand. Adrian. I want you to choose me. Her lips trembled. Adrian. Choose the life we could build. She whispered. Clara. You know what I've promised. Adrian. I know. Clara. You know what I believe. Adrian. I know. Clara. And you still ask. Adrian. Every day. She laughed through her tears. Clara. You're impossible. Adrian. And completely yours. She looked at the ring. Then at him. Clara. Yes. Adrian's eyes closed for one brief second. Relief. Joy. Disbelief. Everything crossed his face. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Then stood. Clara threw her arms around him. He held her tightly. Adrian. You said yes. Clara. I did. Adrian. You actually said yes. Clara. Stop repeating it. He laughed. She smiled against his chest. And that night, for the first time, Adrian allowed himself to imagine a future without blood. They married a few days later. There was no spectacle, no enormous crowd, only the people who truly mattered. Clara walked toward him slowly. Adrian watched her as though the rest of the world had disappeared. When they stood before the altar, their hands met. Clara's were trembling. Adrian squeezed them gently. Adrian, I'm here. She smiled. Clara. I know. Their vows were quiet. Their promises were simple. And when they exchanged rings, Clara felt something inside her settle. Not disappear. Settle. The years of confusion, the fear, the guilt, the impossible attraction, everything seemed to find its place. When Adrian kissed her after the ceremony, it was gentle, almost reverent, as though he understood exactly how much trust she had placed in him. That night, they were finally alone. There was nervous laughter, long silences, tender touches, the awkwardness of two people who had spent months circling each other and suddenly no longer needed distance. Adrian looked at her. Adrian, are you certain? Clara nodded. Clara, I am. He kissed her, slowly, patiently. The world outside disappeared. There was no Mafia empire. No past, no enemies, no vows being questioned, only two people choosing one another. The night became a quiet beginning rather than an ending. And when the lights finally went out, Clara rested against him. Adrian held her carefully. Clara. Adrian, yes, Clara. I'm not afraid anymore. His arms tightened around her. Adrian, neither am I. Years later, Adrian would remember that night as the night his life truly changed. Not because he had married Clara. Because he had finally understood what love demanded. Not possession, not control, not fear, choice. Every morning, he chose her again. And Clara chose him. Their home became nothing like the dark world Adrian had once imagined as his destiny. There were flowers, children's laughter, books everywhere, Clara's soft voice drifting through the halls. And eventually, two tiny cradles, two newborn babies, twins. Adrian stood beside them one morning, completely stunned. Clara sat nearby, smiling tiredly. Adrian, they're real, she laughed. Clara, you helped. He looked at her. Adrian, no. Then he looked back at the babies. Adrian, they're so small. Clara, you're frightened. Adrian, terrified. She smiled. Clara, the great Adrian Moretti is afraid. He looked at her seriously. Adrian, I've faced armed men without blinking. Then he looked at the sleeping children. Adrian, but these two are smaller than my hand. Clara laughed. Adrian walked to her and kissed her forehead. Adrian, you gave me a life I never knew I wanted. She looked up at him. Clara, and you gave me one I never thought I could have. He touched her cheek. Adrian, you deserved heaven. She smiled. Clara, I think God knew that. Adrian looked at her. For once, he didn't argue. Perhaps heaven had not looked like clouds. Perhaps it had looked like an emerald dress beneath candlelight. A frightened girl learning to trust. A dangerous man learning tenderness. A house filled with laughter. Two sleeping children. And two people who had begun their story in violence but somehow found their way toward creation. Clara had once believed her life belonged entirely to the vows she made at 19. Now she understood something deeper. Faith had never promised her that the road would be easy. Only that she would not walk it alone. And perhaps Adrian had never been the destruction she feared. Perhaps he had been the unexpected chapter. The mystery. The answer she had not known how to ask for. Adrian wrapped an arm around her waist. She rested her head against him. Clara, do you still think I'm yours? He looked down at her. Then smiled. Adrian, no. She raised an eyebrow. Clara, no. He kissed her forehead. Adrian, I think I am yours. Clara smiled. And somewhere in the quiet nursery, one of the babies stirred. Adrian sighed. Adrian, our peace lasted exactly 30 seconds. Clara laughed. The sound filled the room. And the man who had once ruled a city through fear stood there surrounded by everything he had never known how to ask for. A wife, a family, a home, and a love that had taught him that the most valuable thing in the world was never something he could own. It was something that could only be given. Freely, again and again, every single day.